We begin with the breaking news of a Ukrainian passenger jet plane has crashed shortly after takeoff from Tehran, killing at least 170 passengers and crew. Rescue workers say there were no survivors. The Ukraine International Airlines Boeing 737 was bound for Kiev. Iranian media reports say the aircraft came down due to technical problems. One official said it had been on fire. Well, our news reporter Gareth Barlow is with me. Gareth, what more can you tell us?
Like you say, this Boeing 737-800 had only just left the airport in Iran, destined for Ukraine, crashed very shortly after takeoff. Satellite tracking suggests that it crashed somewhere in hilly, rugged terrain, and footage from the scene shows widespread debris, the emergency services retrieving bodies with body bags, the Red Crescent, the Reuters news agency also reporting the Iranian state media saying that there are no survivors. At least 170 people have died in this incident. The figures are slightly variable, but we know at least 170 have died. And emergency services being quoted saying the fire was so heavy they couldn't do anything to perform a rescue. They had ambulances and helicopters, but unable to help.
It's far from clear the cause of this crash. We know the flight was delayed by an hour and it was quite soon after takeoff. What we're being told is technical issues.
Yes, that's what state media is reporting, technical problems. It's an incredibly good aircraft. It has a very reliable safety record, and the 737-800 is operated by lots of airlines around the world. It's very unusual for them to crash at all, let alone just after takeoff. This plane was only about 3.5 years old, so it's very new, very modern, very technical aircraft. Obviously, we're being told that there were technical issues, but there's no more information than that.
And just for those who may be thinking about the 737 MAX, this is a completely different aircraft. The 737 MAX entire fleet has been grounded globally, hasn't it?
Yes.
Since last year.
Since last year. This is the 737-800. For their part, Boeing, the aircraft manufacturer, has put out a statement saying it's aware of the reports in Iran and it's gathering more information at the moment. That's all they've said so far.
And where this plane crashed, just outside the international airport in Tehran, it was quite difficult terrain to get to, wasn't it, for those who were trying to get there, rescue workers, etc. Yes,
footage from the scene we're seeing on the flight radar at the moment. As it leaves the airport, it travels towards more rugged mountainous terrain. You can see some of the reports and the footage from the scene showing, debris covering a wide area and no real discernible parts of an aircraft. It is completely scattered and lots of small pieces, meaning it's very hard to try and ascertain any survivors or the number of people killed, and equally quite what caused this. And
in terms of the current conflict between Iran and the US, there's no reason to believe there's a connection.
There's no reason to believe there's a connection. Obviously, though, many people will be looking to see if there is a connection, but there is no credible information thus far to suggest there is so. It is worth noting, though, that the US Federal Aviation Administration, just a few hours previously, had prohibited all US civil aviation carriers from operating above Iraq and Iran and in the waters, or above the waters of the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. That's all American airlines, but other international airlines have followed suit as well. So there were concerns about that airspace, but nothing to suggest that this is linked to that incident and the events in Iran in recent hours.
OK, thank you for now. Gareth Barlow, who's keeping a close eye on all the developments for us here in our newsroom in London. But now let's talk to Jonah Fisher, our correspondent in Kiev. Jonah, a terrible accident. We assume it's an accident at this point. What reaction has there been in Kiev?
Yeah, it's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Kiev. This is the time when that flight, this Ukrainian Airlines flight, was due to arrive here in Kiev, if indeed it had flown as scheduled. In the last half an hour or so, obviously, people here have been waking up to this awful news. We've just had a statement put out by Ukraine's President, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'll just read it to you. In fact, I can't read it to you because my phone is frozen, but there has been a statement in which he called it very scary, sad news. He talked about it in terms of it being a disaster. Certainly that's the phrases that have been used widely here. The Foreign Ministry has echoed that, saying that a disaster had happened and the plane had fallen near Tehran shortly after takeoff. So Terrible news. We've not had anything from the airline, Ukrainian International Airlines at the moment. It's a privately owned company here in Ukraine. This plane, of course, a 737-800, very much a workhorse of aviation, particularly in this part of the world. Not the, as you mentioned there, the 737 MAX that has had safety problems. So yeah, people here just finding out this awful news. We're waiting to see passenger lists. Of course, that's what will likely come out next, and we'll find out exactly how many people are on board. The estimates here vary from anything between about 167 people on board that plane and 180.
And Ukraine International Airlines, as you've mentioned, a private company. The aviation analyst I spoke to recently saying, you know, they've got a great track record in terms of safety.
Yeah, look, anyone who's flown on Ukrainian International Airlines will know it's not a flash airline. Many of its planes are kind of solid workhorses like this. You don't get any frills on board, but it does have a good safety record. We've been going back through the files. We can't see any record of any sort of recent crash or problem with Ukrainian Airlines aircraft. So, yes, as you mentioned, it does have a pretty solid safety record. And as for now, we simply don't know what has caused this. All we can go with at the moment is the official information being put out by Iranian state media describing this as some sort of technical problem.
Yeah, as you say, a technical problem. The plane was delayed from taking off initially. Some reports saying there was a fire seen on the plane, on board, or what have you. But as you say, we're having to wait, aren't we, for these details from the airline itself. And I guess that the government in Kiev as well will make a statement soon.
I've just managed to get my phone to work, so I can tell you in full now what we had from the president here, Vladimir Zelensky. I'll just read it to you. A scary message from the Near East. This is a translation from his Ukrainian. This morning, after takeoff from the international airport in Tehran, a Ukrainian Airlines aircraft suffered a disaster and fell near the airport. All passengers and crew members died. The embassy is going to, of course, keep all the family involved, keep them informed on all the information as it comes through, and there will be lists coming forward, of course, of who was on board that aircraft. And Mr. Zelensky, President Zelensky, says his sincere condolences to the family and loved ones of all passengers and all crew members. So a really awful day here in Ukraine.
Thank you, Jonah Fisher, who is with us, joining us from the capital, Kiev. Well, let's now